Imagine a ship stranded in the icy waters of Alaska's Inside Passage, battered by a relentless snowstorm for nearly 40 hours. Hundreds of passengers huddled aboard, hopeful for rescue, only to be swallowed by the sea. This is the haunting story of the SS Princess Sophia, a vessel whose tragic fate remains one of the deadliest and most mysterious maritime disasters in North American history. In this video, we'll look at what really happened as we dive into the life and the tragic sinking of the SS Princess Sophia. Welcome to Shipwreck History. At the dawn of the 20th century, Alaska's Inside Passage was a vital waterway for connecting isolated northern communities to the rest of the world. With few roads and limited rail infrastructure in the rugged region, steamships became the lifeline for both passengers and freight, navigating the narrow, fjord-like passages that threaded through islands and coastal mountains. These vessels weren't just transportation. They were social hubs and economic engines, carrying miners, settlers, and vital supplies to remote towns during Alaska's gold rush era and beyond. Construction of the SS Princess Sophia began in 1911 and was completed the following year in the Bow, McLaughlin and Company shipyard in Paisley, Scotland. Built to serve the demanding routes of Alaska's Inside Passage, she was designed with durability and stability in mind, qualities essential for navigating the often treacherous northern waters. At 245 feet long and equipped with a triple expansion steam engine, the ship could reach a speed of 14 knots, offering both reliability and efficiency. Her steel hull and reinforced structure were meant to endure harsh conditions, from sudden storms to turbulent waters. For many, steamships like the SS Princess Sophia represented not just access to goods and opportunities, but also a sense of connection to the outside world. The Sophia was part of the Canadian Pacific Railway's prestigious coastal Princess fleet. These ships were renowned for combining reliability with a touch of luxury, offering passengers modern comforts that were a rarity in the challenging conditions of the northern frontier. Lavishly appointed for the time, the Princess Sophia featured amenities that set it apart from other vessels in the region, including fine dining and elegant lounges. It embodied the progress and ambition of a growing transportation network. These features made voyages along the remote northern routes more appealing, attracting miners, prospectors, and families seeking new opportunities in Alaska. These ships were an essential link between the bustling port cities of Vancouver and Victoria and the far-flung outpost of Alaska. The Princess Sophia played a critical role in maintaining this connection. Over her 6 years of service, the Princess Sophia earned a solid reputation as a trustworthy and resilient ship, becoming a familiar sight along the routes between Vancouver, Victoria, and Skagway. Her ability to navigate the unpredictable waters bolstered confidence in the Canadian Pacific Railway's fleet, and she was celebrated as one of its most reliable assets. However, her solid reputation belied the dangerous reality of navigating the Alaskan waters. With their jagged coastlines, hidden reefs, and erratic weather patterns, making every voyage a calculated risk. Yet for years, the Princess Sophia seemed to defy the odds, consistently completing her journeys without incident. This track record of reliability further cemented her place as a vital link in the lifeline of the Pacific Northwest. But her fate would eventually prove that even the most trusted ships were not immune to disaster in these perilous northern seas. What began as another routine voyage for the Princess Sophia would end in tragedy, forever altering the legacy of the ship and the fleet she represented. On October 23, 1918, the SS Princess Sophia departed from Skagway, Alaska, embarking on what would tragically become her final voyage. The vessel was carrying an estimated 343 passengers and crew, including miners eager to return home after the end of Alaska's mining season, business people wrapping up their northern ventures, and families traveling southward before winter set in. For many on board, this was not just a routine journey. It was the final chapter of their seasonal work or an emotional return to loved ones. The Inside Passage, though perilous, was familiar terrain for the Princess Sophia and her crew. This winding waterway had been her route for years, a place where her dependable reputation had been forged. But this voyage quickly became anything but routine. As the ship advanced into open waters, weather conditions began to deteriorate rapidly. By the evening of October 24th, a fierce snowstorm engulfed the region, reducing visibility to near zero. Navigating through these waters requires precision even under ideal conditions. In the chaos of the storm, the Princess Sophia's luck finally ran out when she ran aground on Vanderbilt Reef, a barely submerged rock formation in Lynn Canal that had long been a danger to mariners. Vanderbilt Reef was infamous for its hidden hazards and was unforgiving as the ship struck with catastrophic force. Shortly after running aground on Vanderbilt Reef, in the early morning hours of October 24th, the ship's radio operator sent an initial distress call. The desperation of the situation became increasingly apparent as rescue vessels assessed Princess Sophia's condition. The ship had sustained serious damage, with a hole in her bow, allowing water to flow in at a rate of around 300 gallons per minute. A fishing vessel attempted to reach the Sophia, but was unable to evacuate passengers in the severe weather. Captain of the Sophia, Leonard Locke, assured rescue crews that his vessel was secure, confident that the ship could endure until conditions improved enough to attempt an evacuation. Meanwhile, Captain Ledbetter, commanding the largest ship in the area, the USS Cedar, did not receive word of the grounding until the early afternoon on October 24th, due to delayed and overwhelmed wireless communications. By the time the Cedar arrived on the scene at 8 p.m., nearly 15 fishing vessels and the schooner, King and Winch, had already gathered in the area. After some discussion, Captain Ledbetter, Captain Locke, as well as the King and Winch Captain Miller, agreed that waiting until morning was the safest option for the passengers and crew. The King and Winch would circle the Princess Sophia throughout the night. Before dawn on October 25th, a rescue effort was planned for 5 a.m., at high tide, when rescue vessels could more easily reach them. But it was quickly apparent that it would be unsafe for the passengers of the Sophia to be rescued by boat in the current conditions. By 9 a.m., the storm had intensified to gale-force wind speeds, making it nearly impossible for vessels to stay on station and assist in rescue efforts. Captain Ledbetter proposed using a breeches buoy, essentially a rope-based method, to evacuate passengers from the Sophia to the Cedar, but Captain Ledbetter's attempts to anchor the Cedar failed. With conditions continuing to deteriorate, Captain Ledbetter and Captain Miller devised a plan to anchor the King and Winch, and have the Cedar shield them from the high wind, while the Cedar's lifeboats would transport passengers from the Sophia to the King and Winch. However, the plan hinged on a break in the weather that never came. By about 5 p.m., the situation aboard Princess Sophia had become dire. The ship sent out the message, "Ship foundering on reef, come at once." The Cedar scrambled to find the Sophia, as the wireless operator sent the message, "For God's sake, hurry. The water is coming into my room." The Cedar's crew confirmed they were on their way when they received the last message from the Sophia, "Talk to me so I know you are coming." After about 30 minutes of searching, heavy snow and violent seas forced the Cedar to retreat for her own safety, before running aground herself in the blinding storm. When the storm finally subsided the following morning, the only sign of the Princess Sophia was her foremast protruding from the water. There were no survivors. With no witnesses, what unfolded in those final moments remains a haunting mystery. It is believed the rising storm tide lifted Princess Sophia partially off the reef, only for waves to drive her violently back against the rocks, tearing out her bottom. As the ship was pushed to deeper waters in the storm, she sank. By the time the hull was severely compromised, there was no way to get everyone out safely. An estimated 100 people were still in their cabins when the Sophia sank. Passengers that did try to escape were met with oil spilled into the freezing water, and though some wore life jackets, the icy conditions proved fatal. In the days following the sinking of the Princess Sophia, recovery efforts faced brutal conditions, with strong wind and icy waters hampering the work of search crews. What greeted them was a harrowing scene. Debris from the ship littered the water's surface, and the bodies of passengers and crew, many still wearing their life vests, began to wash ashore. Among the wreckage were deeply personal items. Family letters, children's toys, miners' tools, and pieces of luggage, packed with dreams of futures that would now never come. These haunting reminders personalized the tragedy for communities already stricken with grief. Recovery teams were tasked with collecting the remains of all the victims, a process that stretched over weeks. The oil-covered bodies were brought to local morgues, where survivors' family members and friends gathered to identify their loved ones. Some of the deceased were never fully identified, their names lost to the silence of the sea. The wreck itself remained submerged, inaccessible to further investigation at the time, leaving many questions about the final moments unanswered. The emotional toll of the loss hit the region hard. Communities across Alaska and British Columbia mourned collectively as nearly everyone had some connection to the lost passengers. In Skagway alone, more than 20 residents perished, leaving behind an eerie silence in the small town. Memorial services were held in cities and towns throughout the region. In Vancouver, a public ceremony drew hundreds of mourners, while in Juneau and Skagway, community-wide vigils illuminated the depth of the shared loss. Churches played a central role in providing comfort to grieving families, many of whom had lost multiple relatives in the disaster. The families of the victims attempted to bring legal action against Canadian Pacific Railway over the tragedy, but were unsuccessful. Newspapers across the region published extensive coverage of the tragedy. Headlines reflected the shocking loss of life, and editorials questioned the circumstances of the disaster, including Captain Locke's decision not to evacuate earlier. Public discourse often focused on the limited rescue capabilities in such remote and dangerous waters and the inadequacies of safety protocols in severe weather. The lack of rescue infrastructure in Alaska's Inside Passage prompted calls for improved navigational aids and search and rescue capabilities in the region, such as lighthouses, buoys, and eventually radar systems, which became more widespread in the decades following the accident. The decision to set sail during the storm season raised questions about whether economic pressures outweighed safety considerations. This led to stricter guidelines for sailing schedules during risky weather periods, particularly in regions known for their unpredictable and dangerous conditions. Maritime authorities also enforced enhanced emergency preparedness training for crew members and rescue teams alike. Another glaring lesson of this tragedy was the critical importance of improved weather forecasting and communication systems. At the time, storm warnings were limited and often delayed, leaving captains with little time to prepare for sudden changes in weather. The severe storm that sealed the Princess Sophia's fate highlighted the urgent need for real-time weather updates and more robust communication networks. Had such systems been in place, rescue efforts might have been more effective, potentially saving lives. The wreck of the Princess Sophia still lies at Vanderbilt Reef in Alaska's Lynn Canal, approximately 100 feet underwater. Its exact position has been well documented due to its proximity to heavily traveled cruise ship routes. The site was first explored extensively in the 1990s, with efforts to document the wreck primarily led by divers and researchers interested in its historical significance. Today, the wreck is considered a challenging diving spot due to the cold water, strong currents, and limited visibility typical of the region. It remains largely undisturbed, serving as both a solemn underwater memorial to the lives lost in the tragedy and an attraction for experienced divers. Ultimately, the sinking of the Princess Sophia became a powerful cautionary tale, emphasizing the deadly consequences of underestimating nature's power in one of the world's most unforgiving regions. The lessons learned from this tragedy have saved countless lives in the years since, influencing improvements in weather forecasting, navigation technology, and rescue operations across the maritime world. Let us know in the comments what you think about this story. Could this have ended differently? Could they have been saved? Or was this an unavoidable tragedy? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and share, and subscribe to our channel for all things shipwrecks. Until next time, keep exploring.